Okay, thank you again for getting chance to come to the podium again. I'm now presenting on the behalf of the RISE Ethiopia team, explaining what we are going to do over the next 5 years. Education in Ethiopia is recognized as one of the main elements for getting Ethiopia into the middle income countries over the next 10 years. So Ethiopia aspires to be the lower middle income country in 2025, and both the policymakers, including the Prime Minister, everyone talks that education is the key to reach there. So it's giving high value for education. Then if education has to give that expectation, then learning is the main issue. Without learning, without improving the learning, then we cannot reach there in 10 years' time. So there is a strong political will by the government of Ethiopia to improve the quality of education, and that can be expressed that around a quarter of the total public expenditure is allocated for education. Not by the order of the federal government, but by the will of the states, the regional government. So the responsibility of particularly the general education, where this RISE Ethiopia is focusing, is the general education, is the spending responsibility is the regional state. And the government gives only the block grant to region, and then what goes to the general education is largely determined by the willingness of the regional government. And we have seen over the last 15 years, consistently all regional states allocate up to 35% of their budget to education. So you see that how education is getting priority in the budget. And to improve the quality also, since 2007, they have developed a general education quality improvement program, what we call a G-EQUIP. This is a flagship program that provides support to the general education in 6 areas: in ICT development, in school improvement, curriculum development, teacher training, and student supports in terms of school feeding and others. But there have been remarkable improvement in access over the last 15 years, but we have a question that the learning has not increased. And shows also signs of declining or either stagnating. So if we see, we have two evidences to show that learning has not improved or declined. So look at this. This is a net enrollment of primary and secondary education. And then starting from the year 2000 up to 2015, enrollment has reached from 44% to 94%. And even the recent report says has already reached 100%. And the secondary education also improved, not as fast as the primary education, from 7% to 21% net enrollment. And somewhat loosely associated with learning is the completion rate of primary education, increased from 45 to 51. So this is staggering. But when we look at the quality, the learning, which is coming from grade 4 and grade 8 national learning assessment scale, the composite mean square was around 47.5 for the grade 4 in year 2000, and then in year 2011 is 40%. So we see that there is a decline over time. Compared to 2007, it's somewhat stagnating. And the high school, the secondary education, also declines from 41% to 35%, showing that the learning has not improved, at least, not improved. And when we see this assessment, the overall achievement score is that the national mean score of the subject for all grade was less than 50%. And 50% is the achievement set by the Ministry of Education. So it's less than the achievement set. And the grade 10 mean score of all subjects is 36%, and for grade 12 is 48%. And in grade 10, only 14% scored 50% or above. And in grade 2, only 35% score 50% or above. And then the national learning results of grade 4 and grade 8 has actually reduced slightly over time, especially when we look at by subject, it's highly reduced for maths. Comparing across subgroup indicates that there is inequality in learning in this national learning assessment result. Boys perform better than girls. There is wide disparities among regions, particularly in emerging, less in emerging regions and in pastoral regions. And urban schools outperform rural schools. Therefore, RISE Ethiopia focuses that low and inequitable learning is a starting point. That was starting point. And then we try to do our research based on this evidence. And if we look, the Young Life results is a research project that follows 3,000 children in Ethiopia for 15 years. So this gives us also, because there are two cohorts, the older cohort and the younger cohort, we can compare the learning achievement of the same cohort, the same question for this different cohort at different point in time. And the results suggest that the percent of children who cannot read anything has increased from 10% to 14% in 2013. And percentage of children who can read letters has declined from 15% in 2006 to 9.9%. And we see also there is also a decline percentage of children who can read a word from 15% to 11%. But there is a slight increase in percentage of children who can read a sentence. So this looks somewhat odd, not going. But when we look at the mathematics, it's in all the kind of questions, and their average score has declined by 34% over this period. And this is a fresh result that we collected this year, and we compare the maths score of the 2009 and 2016, and we see that for two of the mathematical items, the score has slightly increased, but not statistically significant, but this is somewhat statistically significant. But reading a pie chart, the score has declined. The percentage of those children who answer correctly this has declined. So there is a slight increase in the children correctly answering for question 1 and 2, but not for question 2. So more than a third of the children were not able to answer any of the 3 questions on average. But there is no that significant difference between 2009 and 2006, 36.6 versus 35.9. And we see also in this result there is inequality of learning. Difference between boys. Boys perform better than girls. Urban area perform better than rural areas. Children from a better off family performs better than area. But what we see in this recent figure is that the difference between this different socioeconomic group is narrowing. So girls improve better than the boys, and rural learning improve better than the girls. So we see that a kind of recent trend. Now, the government has sought to achieve improvement in learning outcome by strengthening the general quality improvement program that I have explained early, focusing directly on reforms to improve education quality and also in the institutional development. GEQUIP is now at the end of its second phase and with the possibility of rolling into the third stage. So it has ended its second stage from 2013 up to 2018, and then next year it will enter into the third phase as a means of increasing the learning outcome. To date, there is no any rigorous systematic assessment of the impact of GEQUIP on raising learning equitably for all groups. So this requires a better understanding of the education system, what went wrong, what is going well, and then this requires careful assessment. So therefore, the RISE Ethiopia group will assess the implementation and the impact of the reform associated with the GEQUIP 2, and also in the possibly inform the implementation of GEQUIP 3 and also evaluate the impact of GEQUIP 3. So this is the core work of this RISE Ethiopia research group will do over the next 5 years. This is the theory of change. This is the theory of change in the G-equip. So building on the theory of change on the G-equip, those that we see are the inputs. Teacher training, teacher salary, child preparation for formal schooling in the preschool, new methods of curriculum delivery, introducing student-centered active learning, and change instructors' behavior in their method of teaching, and school feeding program, and also school improvement program, particularly improving the school environment in terms of textbook, in terms of toilet for girls, and in terms of improving the resource for non-salary expenditure in school is this one. So all this should contribute if implemented very well, and if all the assumptions include are well, then we will see better pedagogy. Teachers will be motivated. Children will be ready for the primary school, and students will be taught at the right level, and there will be children's focus on education instead of being hungry, so that their attendance will increase, and then the community accountability will be strengthened, so that community will participate, and finally we will end up in learning raised equitably. So this is the right theory of change, evidence to inform policy. So we will follow up this. This is what we expect to happen if properly implemented. So following the accountability relationship in the World Development Report and in the Land Bridge 2015 working paper, we developed this conceptual framework. And if we see there is the state, the government, the politician as this, then this will be linked with the citizen and also with the front provider of education service, the Ministry of Education and its apparatus up to the school level. So we identified this in relation to the service delivery framework, the accountability triangle. In Ethiopia, the policy makers, the politicians are two levels. This is a federal state country, so there is a state. The federal state, they have regulations, but regional, the responsibility of the general education is the regional, the states. So there are regulations, and each region have their own regulations. Sometimes it might contradict with the federal law, or sometimes it will go consistent. So that is one area where we have to investigate. But within the Ministry of Education, once it goes, then there is the Federal Ministry of Education, there are Regional Ministry of Education, the Warada Bureau of Education, and the school. And then there is a classroom where the child and the teachers are interacted. And this is where, at the end, where learning behavior has to change, where learning is coming. And then we will see also, investigate also that the teachers confronted with parents through the child is at the client power relationship. So in doing this, then we'll focus on this one. So the RISE Ethiopia group focuses on 6 areas, among several other reforms. The teacher training, which we think are very key and can analyze the causal impact of the causal impact they have on teaching and on learning. So the teacher training and the teacher salary and child preparation for formal schooling, the ECD, and the new method of curriculum delivery and the school feeding program, which the government recently introduced, and to provide school feeding to poor communities and gradually implement, scale it up to level, and school improvement program. So because the implementation of this is not commonly applied in all places, and they start at different point in time. So this gives the researcher to conduct a natural experiment, so that possibly identify the causal impacts on learning. So the objective of this whole project is we have 3 objectives. We understand, evaluate, and inform policy. We understand the situation, and then once we understand the situation, then it will inform our evaluation, then we evaluate the impact of G-equip on learning outcome and the impact of G-equip also on equitable distribution of quality education. And then from this evaluation, then this will help have to bring certain recommendations, certain ideas that the policymakers can use or modify their policies, so inform using the results that we get from this evaluate stage, and we'll get to the inform stage. So when we come to the sampling, our sampling approach will aim to represent 4 categories of regions in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a large country, close to 100 million people living, and there are 9 federal, state, and 2 city administrations. So our sampling should be representative of the whole Ethiopia. It's a very diverse with 80 languages, complicated different cultures. So one of the samples will lie in Addis Ababa, representing the urban areas, partly the urban regions of Harar, Dredwa, and others. And also among the pastorally dominated areas, our sample will lie also in Afar, which is more accessible due to security reasons in Somalia. So instead of Somalia, we'll take Afar. And the other is that there are Benishangul and Gambela, west part of the country, where it is remote, naturally endowed with many natural resources. So we'll take Benishangul Gumuz, representing the emerging region. And Tigray, Amhara, Oromia, SNNP, these are the major big region where more than 90% of Ethiopian people and children live in these areas. So we'll take also largely rural, but few urban areas will be located also in Tigray, Benishangul, and Afar, in addition to Addis Ababa. Then we will have, later on, I will come back to it, but we will have 2 rounds of survey that we have planned now. One is in 2018, the other is in 2021. And in each period, we will have 2 time periods. We will go to, we'll conduct the survey in October, while the school starts, and then we'll go again in May so that we can capture the effect of the teachers' effort and all the school inputs and input the effect in that in value-added model, to conduct the value-added model. So, and then in the second round also, we'll do the same. We'll do the same in October and follow up those children in May. And when we do in the second round, we will follow up those children. So it will be, we are going to develop a panel data. So when we do the second round surveys, so we can have difference in difference model. We can apply difference in difference model, and we can assess some components of the G-equip. So our sample will be in total 135 schools, each with 30 children, and then we'll sample 4,000 girls and 4,000 boys. In total, we will have 8,000, because in Ethiopia, the boys and gays, girls population is more or less 50-50. So it represents that. Now, this is survey time that we will do. In September, October, we will have 2 cohorts. One cohort beginning grade 1, and in October and in May, June will be end of grade 1. And the older cohort will be beginning grade 4 and end grade 4. And then after 3 years, then we go then the younger cohorts. The cohort A will be beginning grade 4 and end grade 4, and the cohort B will be beginning grade 7 and end grade 7. So we have this value added here and the value added here, and each of them will help us identify some impact. But at the end, we'll compare the difference of this with this one, applying difference in difference model, so that this will help. And because also some of the sites will be overlaid with the young life sites, the young life sites have data before the start of the G-equip, then we can identify the learning between beginning of grade 7 and ending of residence with the young life survey at any point in time where we have more flexibility. So we will superimpose this with the young life sites so that we can assess the impact of G-equip in its full components. So not only quantitative, but we'll also conduct qualitative interviews in this sort to supplement more ideas and then identify which of the components of GECOP have been implemented in villages and also in schools. Then coming to the dissemination and stakeholders, how many minutes I have? None, okay. Okay, this is the stakeholder identification. So we identified the state executive, and within the Federal Ministry of Education, there are several directorates. And also the Ministry of Finance is the one involving in providing finance. And the regional government is also have parallel executive political, strong political mandate of guiding the general education, and we identify up to the school level. But at the end, what we are going to do is that the first phase is the inception phase, the 1 year phase. The 1 year phase. So the next year, what we are going to do is that we do the actor map, the political economy analysis, we do the situation analysis of the SABR, we apply the SABR, and we also start developing our designing of the instruments and the sample frame for the quantitative, and also designing of the instrument and sample frame for the qualitative. And the qualitative will be a subsample of the quantitative surveys. And then over these years, we will produce 3 reports: publication strategy, country engagement strategy, and also a report of hypothesis and causal chain report. And then at the end, at the end of this year, next year, then we'll produce the inception report. After this, that we'll go to the next phase, where we go to the evaluation. At this first phase, we should be able to finish all identifying the incoherences among those different accountability relationship, and both internal and cross incoherences. Hope this will go. And these are the 17 team members that we were having meeting last week. So we produce this plan for the next 1 year. Thank you very much.